said you wanted to be worn by me, right? So don't worry, I'll be okay. I ain't scared anymore.
Is the person who wished for a life like that so evil that she deserves to die?
I'm sure that you don't all need to hear me ramble on about Sayaka Miki more than I already have, so I'll keep this background section pretty brief. A student from Mitakihara City, Sayaka's life is forever changed by the appearance of Kyubei, a mysterious being with a dark secret that her friend Madoka feels compelled to save, leading them into a labyrinth, the domain of a witch and the secret source of evil in the world. Luckily, they're saved by Mami, a magical girl, those whose job it is to fight witches in exchange for having any single wish granted. Sayaka eventually makes this contract in exchange for the health of her unrequited love Kyosuke as her wish, who lost his purpose in life due to an injury. While everything seems great at first, the truth of this contract in her world spirals out of control as Sayaka is forced to confront not just her enemy the witches, but other magical girls and even her own sense of self. Is she actually on the side of justice, or is she just a selfish girl deluding herself? On this path of uncertainty, she undoubtedly finds despair. Well, for once we'll have some relatively short equipment sections now that we're dealing with less real-world focused anime. For Sayaka, there's really only one thing to mention, and that's her sword. A fairly basic piece, there's not much remarkable about it. It's not super strong or made of any specific material, and we even see it broken at times. But that doesn't really matter when she can call any number of them from inside of her cape. With those, she can take another to replace one that's broken or lost, throw them at her foes with enough accuracy to trap them with the first swords, almost guaranteeing a solid strike with the next ones. The only other thing that's technically of note on her person is the soul gem, the container her soul is put into when she makes the magical girl contract. This gives her an instant kill weakness of sorts. We can see from other scenes that when a soul gem is destroyed, a magical girl dies, no questions about it. They also can't be too far removed from it or they drop unconscious and eventually die, but since it's going to be on her person when fighting, that really won't be much of a concern. But there is an upside to the soul gem as well. Kyubei explains that since the soul is detached from the body, magical girls are able to withstand a pain that would normally incapacitate humans, so she's not going to be knocked out of a fight due to a couple good blows. This can also be taken even further as she's able to master this separation and block out all pain, letting her charge directly through attacks to reach her foes, although it also causes her reaction time to suffer, meaning a direct charge is really her only option in that state. But that alone wouldn't let her survive such attacks. Sure, not feeling it helps, but it's still tearing her body apart literally. But because her wish was made to heal, her powers reflect that, giving her a superhuman regenerative ability. Merely seconds after she's injured, she's able to heal the wounds and keep fighting. It's remarkable enough for Kyoko to say,
"The hit you took should have put you in the hospital for at least 3 months.
And later it's so extreme that she can basically lose her entire arm and regenerate it without missing a beat. All of this adds together to mean Sayaka doesn't really have a limit. As long as the fight goes, she will too, given her soul gem doesn't cloud in its entirety. You basically have to kill her with one powerful attack or she'll keep healing her way out of it. And that proves to be the only way she's able to eventually be killed after losing control. But moving on, those circles we see her heal herself with aren't just for that, because she can also use them to create a footing anywhere. This gives her an almost essential flight as we see her springboard herself off of one of these circles at an extreme speed, another trait she has even without a circle and momentum. From a dead stop, she can rush forward at insane speeds, leaving everyone in the dust and allowing her attacks to be lightning quick and far-reaching. This gives her what appear to be massive swings of her blade, striking great stretches of space essentially all at once. But don't think this is only a skill for offense. Like any good anime, Sayaka is quick enough to deflect bullet-like attacks with only her blade and sheer skill because anime. Now, all of this comes with some weaknesses too. As we mentioned, at her most resilient, she suffers from a reduced reaction time, making her less likely to dodge her opponent's strikes. While she may be able to regenerate quickly from any damage she does take, she becomes very reliant on that skill. Her attacks aren't carefully planned out assaults, but brute force charges at her foes, and this goes hand in hand with her unsure mental state. Her whole story is a fall from grace, and it's reflected in how she fights. It's not elegant or pretty, but a brutal, repetitive charge, a beating of her foes where Her truest enemy is really herself and how long she'll hold up under the pressure. The best summary would be that she doesn't really fight efficiently, she takes more damage than necessary for the gains she makes. It's essential that she doesn't lose herself when she's fighting, because if so, she'll make the mistakes that lead her to need saving, something that won't be happening here. There's also the mentioned clouding of her soul gem or it being destroyed, but Ryuko wouldn't know about that, and I don't think a soul gem clouding would be a concern over the span of just one fight.
I won't lose. Not to you!
Cool! Now let's see if you can back it up or if you're just blowing hot air!
Ryuko Matoi, the star of Trigger's premiere anime. From the start, her story and motivations are simple and clear. Someone disrupted her peaceful life with her father, killing him and leaving behind half of a giant pair of scissors. She takes it as her blade and travels to Hinoji Academy, where she hopes to find answers from the student council president and essential overlord Satsuki Kryuin. But she can't go straight to the source, instead being made to fight through a volley of students up to the president, power-enhancing uniforms at all. Infused with life fibers, the uniforms most of the show's characters wear give them superhuman qualities, especially the Elite Four, Satsuki's hand-picked council. But none are more enhanced than Satsuki and Ryuko herself, who wear kamois, outfits made entirely from life fibers. Ryuko's is the sentient Seneketsu, who she forms a bond with over the anime, turning him from a simple tool of combat into a genuine friend. Ryuko's equipment is fairly simple as well. The scissor blade is her main weapon, made from hardened life fibers so that it can cut through the uniforms which are also made of them, and be broken by essentially nothing. While she may drop it, there's no chance it's going to break or falter. Other than that, we have to mention Seneketsu and his various abilities and forms that become her tools of battle. He can absorb other life fibers, thus preventing him from having a single weak point like the Goku uniforms, but that won't really be a concern here. Now, his back is a pair of thrusters that can propel Ryuko forward for fast and deadly strikes naturally, or slow her down on dangerous descents, and one more thing, which although only used once, is the spikes on her skirt, which are actually grappling hooks which allow her to hold herself in place for situations where it might be needed. And Seneketsu also has alternative forms. There's Senjin, where he becomes covered in additional blades, Shippu, where he gives Ryuko the ability for flight, and Senjin Shippu, which is naturally a mixture of both. And to top it all off, despite the appearance of a skimpy outfit, Seneketsu acts as armor for Ryuko's entire body, meaning her foes can't simply go after the various seeming weak points, and it's designed for a cheap blow. Ryuko is, to be very blunt, one tough motherfucker. Most of her fights are won by being able to withstand an onslaught from a more experienced and stronger foe, buying her time to find one of their weaknesses and exploit it. This isn't to say she has some grand plans, but is more or less coming up with crazy ideas that just work enough on the spot, like blood in the eyes or attacking everywhere at once against an invisible foe. It's more like some crafty wit than outright tact. Now, most of her combat begins with a wild charge in, leading to her having to play from behind like this due to an awful start, so it's more or less compensation than an outright strength, but it does allow her to best many stronger and more experienced foes. But like we said, to get there she needs time, and to get time in a fight, you need to be resilient. Taking a missile to the face definitely shows how much of that she is, but I don't think there's any better sign of it than, well, having her heart ripped out and surviving as the wound seals itself back up. It's revealed that she's actually infused with life fibers, explaining her superhuman traits and innate power. It also means she has an uncanny ability to heal herself, and at an exceptional rate, as you can see. This infusion also lends her some downright brutal strength. Even without being synchronized with Seneketsu, she's able to slice through groups of enemies at a time with one strike from standstill to the amazement of those around her. And if she's attacking without a blade, it's still deadly, often with an accompanying shockwave or the crumbling of structures around her. She's even able to pull Nanon's flying fortress out of the sky by herself, not to mention directing one of its rockets back to sender. And most of her combat ends with a single blow, really highlighting that strength. She takes a flurry and kills in a single slash. Now, she is fast, especially with Seneketsu Shippu form. However, she's never really seen dodging attacks, but either blocking them or directly taking them. Well, to prove she's tough and adept enough to block, not dodging is something of note. And naturally, because anime, she's able to deflect what essentially amounts to bullets with her blade. Finally, one of her greatest strengths is confidence. While it may make her bullheaded at times, it also allows for a greater control of the situation. When facing Nanon, she's able to block out deafening sound through will alone, entering a state of pure calm where she's unaffected by her foe's strongest ability. She's sure of herself, and so she can't really be shaken mid-combat. Kind of. Strong, witty, resilient, and fast, Ryuko's biggest weakness is one thing: time. Seneketsu runs on her blood, giving her a certain amount of time before she needs a break to recuperate. And furthering this, the more worked up she gets, the worse the issue grows, as Seneketsu directly calls out how much time mistakes can cost her. However, once their bond grows, this issue becomes lessened. As we said, episodes later she becomes more certain and harder to work up into a state where this issue would be exacerbated, but many of her battles ended with an exhausted and worn out Ryuko who needed to retreat. And although it may be harder to rattle her cage, it's not impossible. When Nui appears and directly claims credit for killing Ryuko's father, she enters a state of pure rage, going berserk and losing herself within a destructive urge. She just seemed to grow more powerful here, but not really more so than what we see of her at the end of the series, and her speed doesn't seem to be affected at all given she still goes toe-to-toe with Satsuki. So the real issue here is wit. In this state, she relies on brute force and would never come up with one of her classic spur-of-the-moment plans. And it runs her clock down even faster, meaning it's a slugging match that has a definitive end if she doesn't smash her opponent in blind rage, her eventual passing out and becoming the easiest target of all time. As always with interplay between series, there's some things to cover. In Kill la Kill, there's a pretty big deal made about how tough and hard to cut life fibers are, needing specialized equipment to utilize and defeat them alike. I think the fairest thing to do is consider that Sayaka's blade would have a similar makeup to something like Satsuki's. Since she and Ryuko fight on normally even ground, it seems like the fairest compromise to make. Now, there's a few fights in the extended media of Madoka Magica and directly in Kill la Kill, where each of our pair faces off against multiple foes at once or with others by their side. I think we have to not consider those battles because adding powers of additional characters really greatly complicates things. For example, putting Homura into any combat situation immediately breaks it. Believe me, I've tried. A lot. So we're only going to have their solo moments in consideration here. Both characters also have a final form of sorts, Sayaka either becoming or controlling Octavia depending on the time, and Ryuko entering Seneketsu Kisaragi mode, where they've absorbed the life fibers of everyone else's uniforms. I think gauging power in these states would be a crapshoot, since they respectively win or lose their battles through unconventional means, and we don't get to see much of either one, so we'll be sticking to pre-finale powers for this here. With other Versus videos, we went through specific scenarios where the characters meet, what they have, and so on, but here, I think it's best to have a simple one-on-one. Neither is ever seen planning ahead much for a battle, they won't have any assistance, and their strategy is pretty much the same: rush in, get to their foe, and clobber them. So we're going to go through and give advantage and disadvantage where it fits, and come up with a winner from that. Now, I made this pairing specifically because they have some relatively similar skills, most notably their regeneration or healing. Whatever the damage, they can recover pretty instantaneously, Sayaka through magic, and Ryuko through life fibers, and for neither does it appear to really take any thought or effort. The factor that's going to give one of them the edge in terms of health is Ryuko shown to have more of a limit than Sayaka is. She can heal but gets worn out. As a character whose entire story is being beat down by life and emotions, Sayaka is supposed to take an absolute thrashing, and she does. And I don't think her soul gem would cloud in the span of a single fight either, since it's never seen to, while Ryuko is seen to pass out either during or after having to flee multiple fights, giving her a much more visible limit. To be fair, Sayaka is seen exhausted once too, but that's only after a fight, never during it. If it comes down to a war of attrition, I think Sayaka would have it. But I don't know if it would come to that. Now, in terms of speed, range of motion, or agility, I don't think there's an obvious winner. They each deflect projectiles, large and small, directly take an onslaught of enemy attacks, either dodging or deflecting them depending on the case, and can easily get around the entire battlefield with speed. Ryuko maybe has a slight edge there because of her direct flight, where Sayaka really only simulates it through circles, but then Sayaka has some range to her attacks given she can throw her numerous swords with deadly strength and accuracy, so there's neither who could say get away or make an uncovered assault from a distance. So I think we have to call this part pretty evenly matched, but let's focus in on the mention of weapons. Now, Sayaka's is weaker and is seen to break against full force of Mami's attack in Magica Record, where Ryuko's is never seen to break at all. Plus, even though Ryuko doesn't have spares to waste, she does at times throw the scissor blade and pull it back on a thread, which is something she does, again, with accuracy and power like Sayaka would. And in combat to closer range attacks, the scissor blade has a clear advantage in terms of range. However, Ryuko is disarmed many times in the anime. Sayaka is once, but she can always call another blade from her cape if it happens to end up too far away, where Ryuko can't do that. If Sayaka disarms her, it's a much bigger deal than the other way around, but would she be able to against that kind of greater reach? In Kill la Kill, normally it happens through a strike to the hands, an explosion, or an overwhelming strike when blades meet, so I think the likelihood of it disarming is pretty low, and I guess we have to give Ryuko a slight advantage with that extra reach for this section of kind of speed, agility, and range of motion. In terms of power, I think we have an interesting match. Sayaka has a few moments that stand out to me. This crushing blow against Kirsten, this one against Elsa Maria, and when she's able to deflect one of Mami's more powerful attacks in Magica Record. I think these are comparable to some of Ryuko's, we just don't get as many because Sayaka isn't the main character and is in a shorter series. But if we look at Nanon's missiles, we can say those are similar to Mami's attack given the explosions they create, and each is able to handle that kind of force, so they're similar there. Ryuko has a lot of strikes that, if they weren't in an anime with a more overdramatic presentation, would be as fast and deadly as Sayaka's, given the number of one-hit kills she lands, so again, similar there. And Kill la Kill is full of excessively powerfully presented attacks, but I think we could reason that Sayaka's blow against Kirsten could match up with some of Ryuko's. But when we look at all this as a whole, a problem starts to arise for Sayaka. They might be comparable, but let's look at how they got to that point. Sure, Sayaka can make long sweeping blows that appear to be one instantaneous hit, but are really a long drawn out swing, and her strongest moment is coming off of the back of a fairly long and fast lead up. She could slice through a heap of enemies at once, but her blade would have to strike each of them after at least a healthy leap. Ryuko, however, can get that power instantaneously. Here we watch her, even without Seneketsu, do just that to a group of foes, no run up with a single blow from a static position. While they may produce similar results from their attacks, it's crucial to look at how they get to those results. And what we see is that Sayaka's strength is much more a result of momentum than it is the kind of raw strength Ryuko has. Sure, much like Ryuko, Sayaka can pull that speed up instantly, dashing ahead from a standstill, but Ryuko basically has the same ability while also being able to have that power from a standstill. And given that they're about evenly matched on speed, then Ryuko really starts to pull ahead here. And I think this difference in power ends up becoming the death nail for Sayaka when we look at how Ryuko's battles end. Sayaka has the edge in health and the log term of the battle, but Ryuko's signature on most battles is a one-hit KO. She puts all of her strength into one single swipe of the Scissor Blade's decapitation mode and ends her foes. Being able to regenerate doesn't mean much when a more physically powerful and comparably quick foe lands one knockout punch that ends you so quick you won't be able to heal. While Ryuko doesn't actually kill throughout the anime, we can essentially draw the comparison that the life fibers being lost equates to a kill. It's just the series wanted its minor characters around for things later. So I think the battle would be an initial slog of healing and quick strikes and darting around, while these two foes figured each other out, their different speed and power levels, which gives Ryuko an edge because it's the time she needs to analyze Sayaka's weaknesses and create some sort of ploy. It would quickly become obvious that she had to end things in one blow, that her foe could regenerate much like her, so she would use that to open the door for an all-crucial death strike, knowing full well it had to end in an instant. Things just don't look good for everyone's favorite magical girl. But there is one more factor that could change things. A Berserk Ryuko would be the magical girl's saving grace. It would run out the battle's clock faster and reduce the wits of the dangerous duo she was facing off against, ensuring that she could avoid the powerful nail striking her coffin. But one of the reasons I chose to make this comparison is because these characters have such similar qualities, even though they might not appear like it. That includes moments of despair and rage. And the fall Sayaka experiences is much harsher than Ryuko's. The story of Kill la Kill is one that's very direct and positive. It's creating exactly what it wants the viewer to feel. It's a sense of growing confident and being okay with oneself, whatever outfit they're in, essentially being happy in their own skin. Ryuko even goes through exactly that, even down to the struggle of feeling like an inhuman monster, very similar to Sayaka. However, Madoka Magica is a darker story that would rather have the viewer ponder a more open-ended narrative and decide for themselves how to avoid the awful fate we're being presented with. As such, Sayaka meets her doom at the face of despair and rage, unable to be saved by friendship from others or willpower like Ryuko is. There's no way Sayaka would be able to put her into a state of rampage because she herself would be much easier to fall into. Ryuko even directly confronts the object of her excessive rage and controls it later, confirming that she's grown. We don't get that with Sayaka until it's too late. Even if we consider the ultimate badass Sayaka of Rebellion, that means we'd also have to allow Ryuko to have her final form, which would likely be able to produce the amount of energy which kills Octavia in the original story anyway. Much like with Valmet vs. Revi, one character here loses because their story is darker and requires them to have more pain and obvious weakness that isn't easily resolved. Believe me, as someone who literally created a whole top tier called Sayaka in their character rankings for Madoka Magica, it pains me to say it, but she doesn't win this one. I think Ryuko takes a pretty clear win. Anyway, I hope this was an enjoyable versus and maybe not too obvious or anything like that. They're two very different series, which made it a bit tough, but I saw enough similar qualities I thought it would be an interesting debate. As always, let me know any others you'd like to see, because one of the hallmarks of YouTube is taking other people's ideas and then doing it yourself. But really though, I'd love to hear your thoughts, not just because it helps the video with the algorithm, but also because I'm no expert on this. I'm just taking the best guess I can. So let me know what you think too. Now, here's a playlist of other versus videos, and oh, well, look at that, there's some awesome supporters above me right there. You can find a link to support me above down below in the pinned comment along with some other socials. But anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope I'll see you again soon.